Welcome to BeFM Drama, where we turn great works of English literature into gripping radio. I'm your host, Joshua Cornwell, and today we're bringing you part 4 in a 5-part adaptation of The Crooked Man, a classic Sherlock Holmes mystery from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Sherlock Holmes has been hired to investigate the apparent murder of Colonel Barclay, the decorated commanding officer of the Royal Mallows, a British Army regiment. Colonel Barclay died in his own home of a bloody head wound after a fierce argument with his wife Nancy, during which she shouted the word David. And even though Holmes discovered a wooden club and the footprints of a mysterious animal in the room where the colonel died, his traumatized wife remains the prime suspect in his murder. Dr. Watson has agreed to accompany Holmes in his final investigation of the case, but not before hearing the testimony of Miss Morrison, a close friend of Nancy Barclay, who witnessed a mysterious encounter on the eve of the colonel's murder. When my friend, Mr. Holmes, approached Miss Morrison, he explained to her that he was perfectly certain that she held all the facts in her possession, and assured her that her friend, Mrs. Barclay, might find herself in the dock on a capital murder charge unless the matter were cleared up.
Miss Morrison is a little ethereal slip of a girl, with timid eyes and blonde hair, but I found her by no means wanting in shrewdness and common sense. She sat thinking for some time after I had spoken, and then, turning to me with a brisk air of resolution, she broke into a remarkable statement which I will condense for your benefit.
I promised my friend that I'd say nothing of the matter, and a promise is a promise. But if I can really help her, when so serious a charge is laid against her, and when her own mouth, poor darling, is closed by illness, then I think I am absolved from my promise. I will tell you exactly what happened upon Monday evening. We were returning from the Watt Street mission about 9:15. On our way, we had to pass through Hudson Street, which is a very quiet thoroughfare. There is only one lamp in it, upon the left-hand side, and as we approached this lamp, I saw a man coming towards us with his back very bent, and something like a box slung over one of his shoulders. He appeared to be deformed, for he carried his head low and walked with his knees bent. We were passing him when he raised his face to look at us in the circle of light thrown by the lamp, and as he did so, he stopped and screamed out in a dreadful voice, "My God, it's Nancy!" Mrs. Barclay turned as white as death and would have fallen down had the dreadful-looking man not caught hold of her. I was going to call for the police, but she, to my surprise, spoke quite civilly to the fellow. "I thought you had been dead this 30 years, Henry," she said in a shaking voice. "So I have," said he, and it was awful to hear the tones that he said it in. He had a very dark, fearsome face and a gleam in his eyes that comes back to me in my dreams. His hair and whiskers were short with grey, and his face was all crinkled and puckered like a withered apple. "Just walk on a little way, dear," said Mrs. Barclay. "I want to have a word with this man. There is nothing to be afraid of." She tried to speak boldly, but she was still deadly pale, and I could hardly get her words out for a trembling of her lips. I did as she asked me, and they talked together for a few minutes. Then she came down the street with her eyes blazing, and I saw the crippled wretch standing by the lamp-post and shaking his clenched fist in the air as if he were mad with rage. She never said a word until we were at the door here, when she took me by the hand and begged me to tell no one what had happened. "It's an old acquaintance of mine who has come down in the world," said she. When I promised her I would say nothing, she kissed me, and I have never seen her since. I have told you now the whole truth, and if I withheld it from the police, it is because I did not realise then the danger in which my dear friend stood. I know that it can be only to her advantage that everything should be known.
My friend paused again when he came to the end of his telling of Morrison's statement, staring at me once more with eyes of fierce intensity.
There was Miss Morrison's statement, Watson, and to me, as you can imagine, it was like a light on a dark night. Everything which had been disconnected before began at once to assume its true place, and I had a shadowy understanding of the whole sequence of events. My next step was to find the man who had produced such a remarkable impression upon Miss Barclay. If he was still in Aldershot, it could not be a very difficult matter. There were not such a very great number of civilians, and a deformed man was sure to have attracted attention. I spent a day in the search, and by evening, this very evening, Watson, I had run him down.
Who is this man?
His name is Henry Wood, and he lives in lodgings in the same street in which the ladies met him. He has only been 5 days in the place. In the character of a registration agent, I had a most interesting gossip with his landlady. The man is by trade a conjurer and performer, going around the canteens after nightfall and giving a little entertainment at each. He carries some creature about with him in that box, about which the landlady seemed to be in considerable trepidation, for she had never seen an animal like it. He uses it in some of his tricks, according to her account. So much the woman was able to tell me, and also that it was a wonder the man lived, seeing how twisted he was, and that he spoke in a strange tongue sometimes, and that for the last 2 nights she had heard him groaning and weeping in his bedroom. He was all right as far as money went, but in his deposit he had given her what looked like a bad florin. She showed it to me, Watson, and it was an Indian rupee.
A rupee? Huh. That's not a currency which one would expect to find on these shores.
So now, my dear fellow, you can see exactly how we stand and why it is I want you. It is perfectly plain that after the ladies parted from this man, he followed them at a distance. Then he saw the quarrel between husband and wife through the window, that he rushed in, and that the creature which he carried in his box got loose. That is all very certain, but he is the only person in this world who can tell us exactly what happened in that room.
And you intend to ask him?
Most certainly, but in the presence of a witness.
And I am to be your witness?
If you would be so good. If he can clear the matter up, well and good. If he refuses, we have no alternative but to apply for a warrant.
But how do you know he'll be there when you return?
You may be sure that I took some precautions. I have one of my Baker Street boys mounting guard over him, who would stick to him like a burr, go where he might. We shall find him in Hudson Street tomorrow, Watson, and meanwhile I should be the criminal myself if I kept you out of bed any longer.
It was midday when we found ourselves at the scene of the tragedy, and under my companion's guidance, we made our way at once to Hudson Street. In spite of his capacity for concealing his emotions, I could easily see that Holmes was in a state of suppressed excitement, while I was myself tingling with that half-sporting, half-intellectual pleasure which I invariably experienced when I associated myself with him in his investigations.
This is the street.
We turned into a short thoroughfare lined with plain 2-storied brick houses.
Ah, and here is Simpson to report.
A haggard child dressed in dirty street clothes came running up to us.
He's in there all right, Mr. Holmes.
Good, Simpson. I'll have a payment for you once his business is done. Come along, Watson. This is the house.
He sent in his card with a message that he had come on important business, and a moment later we were face to face with the man whom we had come to see. In spite of the warm weather, he was crouching over a fire, and the little room was like an oven. The man sat all twisted and huddled in his chair in a way which gave an indescribable impression of deformity. But the face which he turned towards us, though worn and swarthy, must at some time have been remarkable for its beauty. He looked suspiciously at us now out of yellow-shot, bilious eyes, and, without speaking or rising, he waved toward 2 chairs.
Mr. Henry Wood, late of India. I've come over this little matter of Colonel Barclay's death.
What? What should I know about that?
That's what I want to learn. You know, I suppose that unless this matter is cleared up, Mrs. Barclay, who's an old friend of yours, will in all probability be tried for murder.
The man gave a violent start.
I don't know who you are, nor how you come to know what you do know, but will you swear that this is true that you tell me?
Why, they are only waiting for her to come to her senses to arrest her.
Oh my God! Are you in the police yourself?
No.
What business is it of yours, then?
It's every man's business to see justice done.
You can take my word, as she is innocent.
Then you are guilty.
No, I am not.
Who killed Colonel James Barclay, then?
It was a just providence that killed him. But mind you this, that if I had knocked his brains out, as it was in my heart to do, he would have had no more than his due from my hands. If his own guilty conscience had not struck him down, it is likely enough that I might have had his blood upon my soul. You want me to tell the story? Well, I don't know why I shouldn't, for there's no cause for me to be ashamed of it.
Who is this Henry Wood, this crooked, broken man hunched over the fire in his overheated room? Find out tomorrow evening in the gripping final episode of The Adventure of the Crooked Man here on BeFM Drama.